Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger. We're happy to have you here. Let me rearrange the furniture here just a little bit so we can get that DawgNation Daily logo right there on the screen. Really fun show for us coming up today. Kaylee Mansell pops by. I always love having her on the show, and we're going to have her for a specific reason. Obviously, next week begins SEC Media Days. Kaylee going to do a great job of anchoring our coverage there for that, and she's got a big series of shows she's about to debut here on the DawgNation video channels there as well. We're going to let Kaylee tell us about that. Also, Jeff Sentell stops by. You know, I'm about to kind of step away from work for a few days, but the business around Georgia football will not be slowing down. A lot of recruiting targets set to make their announcements. Some of these could be good news for Georgia. Some of these may be not quite such good news for UGA, but we'll cover all of that on the program here today. And I want to begin with this, and I think this is really fun. So these are kind of like the final moments of summer before we actually get into what I sort of think of as an in-season cadence. You know, we've definitely kind of been in sort of a summer spirit around here. And I love summer. I love that. I love being outside. I love being with my family. Love going to the pool, getting ready to be on Utopia of the Seas myself. So I've got a little bit of summer here left. But there is also that feeling when summer's over, break is over, it's time to get to work. And you certainly get the sense that we are right there on the verge. For as much as we enjoy the college football conversation 365 days a year, there is no doubt, to borrow from the great Jim Ross, business picks up around this time of year. And we've got a kind of a great way to sort of get all of that started here, and we're going to start the show by doing that. We'll briefly mention some of the new details as it relates to the Smile Mondin situation. We probably feel like we have to talk about that, so we'll do that briefly. But I promise you we'll keep it fun and light as much as we possibly can here on a Friday, and a special one for me because after today, for the first time in a long time, I'm going to step away from work here for a little while, something I have not done very much over the course of the last 9 years, but we will be doing that, and we'll talk more about that here coming up in a moment. So what do you say we get it started? Two great guests, really fun Friday, and you, of course, a big part of all of that. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I really, really, really love doing this show, and you know, I'm thankful to be able to have it. Even when I'm away from work, I sort of miss it. I just like the act of coming on and talking about Georgia football. It's just something that I really enjoy doing. And as we get ready to begin, believe it or not, our 10th season of covering Georgia football, you know, I'm reminded that there just aren't very many days in which we haven't done this show. You know, Christmas Day, Thanksgiving, usually Memorial Day, usually the 4th of July. Those are like the holidays that we take off. I think there was one day a couple of years ago when I was sick, first time I'd been sick the entire time we'd done the show, and there was like a snow day back in like, say, 2017, I guess, early 2018 maybe it would have been. And that's it in terms of missing the show and not being around, you know, for the show. We just show up every day. The joke I always say is it's not DawgNation Daily unless you do it every day, and that's kind of what we do. Many of you are aware, though, that I am about to step away from work for a few days. I had a big event planned, and this is something that I've been talking to my bosses about for like almost a full calendar year of, hey, coming up near the end of the summer, we're going to be doing something with our family that's a little bit different than we've ever done before. And so I would like to kind of leave work and not be a part of the show for a little while, if you don't mind. And then I got the opportunity to go be on Utopia of the Seas, which I'm really excited about. And obviously you've heard me, you know, talk plenty about. And it just so happened these were sort of back-to-back weeks, and the folks around here were kind enough to allow me to be away, and I certainly appreciated all of that. So I wanted to start the show just very, very quickly by saying a couple of things here. First of all, the next couple of weeks here during this normal spot, both in terms of the video at 10 a.m. and what you watch after the fact on demand, and what we're going to put on the DawgNation Daily podcast feed, I think are going to be really, really fun things. First of all, next week is SEC Media Days. Our good friend Kaylee Mansell, who's going to join us later on the show to talk more about this, is going to anchor our coverage from Dallas. Very first time ever for this event being there, and obviously welcoming two new teams to the SEC. Next week, SEC Media Days is going to be fascinating. And so we're going to make that a big part of what we do around here. We've also got some special surprises also planned there as well, stuff that you'll kind of see in the normal spot where you are used to seeing DawgNation Daily. So while I can't be here, we're going to work really hard to make this a really good experience for everybody who is here. And my intention is to have sort of a brief presence on the show each day. So we're going to try to make it a little bit normal at the beginning of the show from me in a remote location, but obviously the majority of the broadcast is going to be something other than me. So for the next couple of weeks, it is going to be a little weird around here, and I'm really excited about kind of getting through this time and then getting back and then being really ready for the season that's on its way. And I want to talk about that here just for a moment, because with me doing what I'm doing, as I mentioned, when I'm back, it's like fall camp. It's like the season as we know. I mean, we are going to be in it. And I wanted to kind of finish today, my final show here for a couple of weeks. I wanted to kind of finish today with a little bit of a reminder about what it's going to feel like once we get to that moment, what Georgia's playing for, what the vibe around UGA is. And it's obviously a reinforcement of all the things we've been talking about for all these many months. It's the 2023 season came to an end, and the disappointment we felt about Georgia being excluded from the college football playoff, our belief that Georgia could have been the best team in the country and would have had a chance to win the national championship if it had made the Final Four, and we've obviously done plenty on that there at the time. But as we've kind of moved on from what was in 2023 to what could be in 2024, now we're left with the belief and the understanding that Georgia is as well set up and, frankly, better set up than any team in America to make a run towards another national championship here this season. And obviously, I say that, and you may listen in on me saying that, and you would perhaps assume, well, of course you would say that, B.A., but it's not just me who is saying that right now. Every now and then it's kind of appropriate to kind of move ourselves out of the bubble of DawgNation and look at what other voices, perhaps more objective voices, are also saying. So as a little bit of a reminder of what the vibe is going to be when I get back from being gone for a couple of weeks and we kind of really get into the true in-season posture, I want to use the words here a little bit from the SEC Network analyst Cole Kubelik. Now, Cole's a guy that you see on TV on the SEC Network. He does his own radio show in Birmingham, and in addition to that, he's got his own podcast as well. This is one of those days in which it seems like everybody's got 15 jobs. I sort of feel that way sometimes too. And Cole Kubelik, I guess, another example of that there as well, of a guy who's got his own podcast in addition to the other media stuff that he's doing. And a couple of days ago, he kind of dropped a Georgia preview on his podcast feed. And no surprise here, no spoiler alert, he clearly thinks that Georgia is well set up for success. And after kind of rolling through all of the various position groups and things like that, he finally settled on the overarching opinion here, which is right now there is nobody else playing at Georgia's level. Let me let you hear Cole Kubelik talking about exactly what his overall overarching expectation is for Georgia here this year.
Georgia's going to be in the playoff. How much of a playoff run can they make? Some going to have to do with health. Some may have to do with matchups once you get into the postseason. But I don't look across college football and see a ton of teams that are going to give Georgia fits because of how they play, their style of play, or who exactly they have that they're going to be offering up from a matchup perspective. There may be some pieces of this team that could be a little bit problematic. Like last year's Michigan team may have been a little bit of an issue. But I don't know if there's a team like that in college football this year. I mean, you look at Ohio State, got some good receivers, going to have a good quarterback, great offensive coordinator, great running backs. I don't love their offensive line. Do I look at their offensive line as being a big problem for Georgia's? No, I don't. Texas could offer some things, but hell, they're going to get Texas in the regular season, so you know what you got there. I just don't look at a lot of mismatches for this team as far as how they're going to play, where they're going to play, and what's going to happen. So I think it's a team that should be the favorite to win the national championship, even over Ohio State, because Ohio State doesn't have a quarterback returning in that system.
Isn't it exciting? I mean, to me it is, that after all of these times and all these months of waiting and preparing and contemplating what could be, now we are seemingly on the doorstep of the 2024 season. SEC Media Days is next week. The actual games themselves start taking place shortly after that, with kind of a month of prep time leading into all of that. And an SEC network analyst looks at the same situation we've all been looking at, and for the most part, he arrives at the same conclusion that we have been arriving at, which is that on paper, Georgia is the best team in America. Not perfect, and frankly, some things to answer for in terms of small deficiencies that perhaps prevented it from winning a national championship last year. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but in the enviable position of being on top compared to everybody else. That is the excitement that Georgia fans ought to have for the upcoming year. And for all the hype and the discussion that Ohio State has generated, Cole Kubelik's right to point out, you still got major questions at quarterback, and you've got major questions along the offensive line. And those are two very significant spots to have major questions. And so, therefore, even though Ohio State, for whatever reason, has generated more buzz than UGA, on paper, Ohio State is not better than UGA. The ball is in Georgia's court to win the national championship again. Now, let me say one more point about this, then we're going to change the subject and talk about something else. The other reason why I think the Georgia fans ought to be so excited about the 2024 season is not just because you got SEC network analysts saying, hey, Georgia may win it all again. I think the other thing here is that so much of what Georgia is going to be proven on kind of a week-to-week basis based on this 2024 schedule. And Cole Kubelik also talked about that a little bit in his podcast preview of UGA, and we've certainly talked about that plenty ourselves. Compare this to 2023 for a moment, where it was a kind of a frustrating conversation, if we're being completely honest, that most of what we talked about Georgia last year was sort of this theoretical thing of you see him play against so-and-so, and you're kind of left to wonder, well, okay, how will that show up against a better team later on in the season? There was a lot of pontificating that had to go on because the actual week-to-week matchups themselves, frankly, weren't all that valuable and they weren't all that meaningful. But that's not going to be the case in 2024, as Cole says. If it's not Ohio State that's the biggest threat and challenge to Georgia, it may be a team like Texas, and Georgia gets to play Texas in the regular season. And that comes with a challenge, of course, but it also comes with incredible intrigue and really meaningful football. And it's not just, Texas. I mean, Clemson's still going to be a top 15 preseason team. Georgia gets to play them. The first SEC game for Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. We're going to talk more about Tennessee in a moment. That's a big home game in November. Going to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. By the way, condolences to the Kiffin family on the loss of their patriarch, Monty Kiffin, the father of Lane Kiffin. But that's a big game that Georgia gets to play in November there as well. This is going to be such a fun year. Maybe the most interesting year that college football has ever had, with bigger, better conferences, with an expanded playoff. What an exciting time to be the preseason number one. And what a fun fall that's on the way for all of us. And I can't wait to talk to you about all of that a couple of weeks from now for many, many months as we ride through this 2024 season. All right, now, with that said, let me change gears and talk about something that's a lot less enjoyable, but I do want to at least mention this because I think it's important. So we did find out more details yesterday about the arrest of Smile Mondin and the so-called racing charge that he's kind of facing related to this, that one of his teammates, DeMello Jones, also involved in this there as well. And I guess Mondin was going 70-something miles an hour in the 45-mile-an-hour zone, I believe it was, and kind of sort of, shifting lanes, things like that. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about this because I feel like the market's fairly saturated on people giving you opinions about this. Here's the only thing that I'll say is that, look, I would put this kind of thing in a little bit different category than some of the other stuff that's gone on. Like, for instance, the other day, Sokovie White drove the wrong way downtown late at night. Of course, you're going to get pulled over for that, and of course, you're going to whatever, and there's just sort of a legal procedure that gets followed. As we sort of said, you've got to be pretty aggressive in how you police an entertainment district very, very late at night. I wasn't really scandalized by any of that. Not that mad at Sokovie. He just made a driver error. People do. Not mad at the police about that. That's just how they feel like they got to police that particular zone. That, to me, was sort of not that big of a deal. And kind of putting this in the category of, well, this is X number of arrests for Georgia dating back to blah, blah, blah. Like that type of thing, just sort of counting arithmetic of, it's just not that interesting to me personally, because most of these instances, I believe, are all pretty different, right? There are various categories of things that have gone on. And the sort of public relations part of this of, well, it's bad PR for Georgia because this keeps happening. As I've told you before, and not everybody agrees with this, and I'm fine with that. I don't believe in the concept of public relations. I don't think it's real. I think if you close your eyes, it no longer exists. It's just a thing that people make up. And so from the standpoint of how do you solve the PR problem for Georgia when it comes to something like this, frankly, I don't know how you would do that, nor do I know that you ought to be worried about that. How do you keep your players safe? That, to me, is a much more significant question to be asked. And if Smile Mondon was driving the way that this latest report suggests that he was, that's not very safe. And if DeMello Jones was doing the same thing, that's not very safe. And that's one of those deals where figuring out the answer to that question, I believe, is probably pretty important. And so it obviously leads to the discussion of, and we talked about this at least a little bit yesterday, of, okay, well, what do you do about this then? Do you just kick him off the team? And I want you to understand this, is that I think that there is a little bit of a false choice that sometimes exists. People want to say, well, do you value winning or do you value doing the right thing? Because we just talked a moment ago about SEC network analyst who thinks Georgia's going to be the favorite to win the national championship. And so therefore a player like Mondon theoretically helps you win those games. Do you value winning or do you value doing the right thing? But a lot of you know this. Like, Georgia could kick Smile Mondon off the team today. Its odds to win the national championship would remain unchanged. Every single point spread for every single game Georgia plays here this year would also remain unchanged. That Smile Mondon, who's a very good football player, his presence on the Georgia roster or his absence on the Georgia roster doesn't change the overall trajectory for Georgia at all. Because when it's a sport of 11 guys on the field at the same time battling another 11 guys, unless you're a quarterback, your individual impact on the game is just not as significant as some people think that it is. We see this all the time with injuries, that people have a tendency to overrate the importance of one injury, because in football with 22 guys in the field, one player's presence or absence just doesn't make that big of a difference. Anybody who bets the sport on a regular basis can certainly tell you about that. So this idea that if Mondon doesn't get kicked off the team, and I don't believe that he will, this idea that if Mondon doesn't get kicked off the team, it's because somehow Georgia values winning more so than doing the right thing. The actual facts on the ground, I don't think back that up necessarily as much as conventional wisdom might think that it does. Here is what I really think you got to consider in terms of the actual crux of the problem of Georgia players not being as safe as they could be, and frankly putting people around them in an unsafe situation too, because if you're driving on the roads and somebody's doing what Mondon was alleged to have done, or what in some cases other Georgia players have been alleged to have done, that's a serious situation to even be around that. And a lot of us experience that too. When you see people kind of weaving through traffic, you realize how dangerous that can perhaps be. Here's the problem. Anybody who's like a criminal justice expert can tell you this, is that the true deterrence of bad behavior is not the severity of the punishment. It's the certainty you're going to be caught. That's just the way life works, is that if you think you'll get away with it, even if the penalty is severe, criminal justice experts will tell you, you still sort of have a tendency to see a rise in the behavior because people think, well, even if the penalty is severe, I'm not going to get caught. So that's why it's like, kicking Smile Mondon off the team and making an example out of him or out of somebody else. It's why it's not the automatic fix you assume that it might be, because of the fact that other players know that when they drive fast, they didn't get caught. So therefore, whatever happened to Mondon is not going to happen to me because I'm not going to get caught, because I look around, I don't see any police. I'm okay to drive as fast as I want to drive. That's just in a roundabout way beyond Georgia football. That's just sort of an issue there in life. So I think this problem, and to a certain extent it probably is a problem, I think this problem is at times a little bit more complicated than it's sometimes been described as of being. But I do take the Georgia staff at their word that they are very serious about trying to provide some sort of remedy for this. And like any adult talking to people who are a couple of decades younger than them, trying to use the received wisdom of that age to say, hey, here are decisions you need to try to avoid and here are decisions you need to try to make on a little bit better footing. That's been going on forever. We had people trying to pour into our lives when we were younger. Now some of us are older trying to do the same thing to our own kids or kids we coach or kids we teach, whatever else. And conveying those messages has never been easy, and it's not certainly getting any easier here right now there too. So bottom line for me on this, and then I promise you we'll talk about something different, is that, the description of what Mondon is alleged to have done and one of his teammates, DeMelo Jones, I take that pretty seriously. That seems pretty dangerous. Dangerous for the Georgia players involved and dangerous for the players around them. But the actual fix on this, I don't think is quite as simple as sometimes it's described as being. You could kick him off the team, and maybe that solves your PR problem. But I don't know that your PR problem is an actual problem. The real problem is, how do you keep young people safe? And that's a question that people have been asking for a very long time. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger, and we're happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us, live on video. And for me anyway, last time I'll be live here for a couple of weeks, but nonetheless, live on video, 10 a.m. across all platforms, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 Ref, podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just so happy to have you here. And as I mentioned before, just so excited about the 2024 season that's on its way. And when I get back, after being on Utopia of the Seas and being with my family for a week after that, when I return, things are going to be showtime, go time for a really, really fun season. Now, while these next couple of weeks are sort of ticking by, kind of the final remnants of summer as we know it, don't forget your local Kroger, the place to go to get you ready for everything you got going on. Big cookouts on the grill, fun pool parties, everything else. You can get those fresh meats for grilling, easy entertaining, you got the beverages and everything else, all that kind of stuff, the fresh produce, the things you sort of think about this time of year. You can get all of that right there at your local Kroger. So stop by and shop in-store at your local Kroger or online at Kroger.com. That is a lot of fun. All right, we got a couple of great guests on our show today. As I mentioned a little earlier, Kaylee Mansell before we're done. Kaylee's got some great stuff coming up in my absence next week with SEC Media Days, and some fun stuff coming up in addition to that, some surprises you're about to see on the DawgNation video channels. We're going to let her tell you about that. And, of course, Jeff Sentell here, too. A lot of UGA recruiting targets are getting ready to make some commitment decisions. We're going to do our part to preview some of that here in just a little bit there as well. Prior to that, though, let's go around the doghouse. And this is sort of just for fun here today. We got a chance to hear from Stetson Bennett, first time in a long time from him. He was on a podcast with a guy named TJ Calloway. Some of you know TJ. A lot of times you'll see me wearing, I'm not today, but a lot of times you'll see me wearing like an Onward Reserve shirt or something like that on the show. Onward Reserve's done a good job making like Georgia-themed apparel and things like that. And TJ's the founder of Onward Reserve, and I guess he's got his own podcast there as well. And he's done some NIL deals with some college athletes. One of the guys he's worked with is Stetson Bennett. And so I guess TJ has started a podcast, and Stetson Bennett was a guest on the show for a good long time. There's a lot of different things over the course of like an hour's conversation. They're going to be somewhat newsworthy. But there was one thing for me in particular that I thought was really interesting. Now, before I play the clip, let me say this. I've had all kinds of issues this morning. Just sometimes you just sort of get plagued by this, a lot of like sort of tech demons and things like that. A lot of my technology personally wasn't working very well today. So I did not think I was going to have this clip for you to be able to play, but Cody Chavins did a great job kind of at a moment's notice of getting this for me, and I really, really appreciate that because I wanted you to be able to hear this. So Stetson was sort of talking about his favorite moment at Georgia, and he talked a good bit about the Tennessee game in 2022 when the Tennessee fans got his cell phone number. They're kind of blowing him up. But then on the field, Stetson blew up the Vols. And I love this because I've been a Georgia fan, and I'm 40 whatever years old right now. I've been a Georgia fan my entire life. The single best moment, I believe, in Sanford Stadium history was that day against against Tennessee, and different kind of orange, I guess. Tennessee in 2022. The fans, the intensity of the moment, and as we said, a palpable sense that all of this was built around. All of a sudden, everybody's decided that Tennessee is better than Georgia, the reigning national champions, yet Tennessee was being treated as the big dog in this game. And the energy that the team and the fans collectively fed off that day, I'm just telling you right now, it was remarkable. And in this interview with TJ Calloway, the founder of Honor Reserve, Stetson Bennett talked about it. I think this is really good from Stetson about why there was so much intensity around that Georgia-Tennessee game in 2022. Here's Stetson Bennett.
Run's probably my favorite play because I told Brett, I said, because they upset me. Because they called my phone, like 1,000 times that night. I had to turn it off. I had, I listened to like white noise before every game and freaking couldn't listen to it because I had to turn my phone was still just yelling. So I was upset. And I told Brett, I was like, if I score, I got to score. I can't throw it and then do it. I got to run a touchdown in. I'm going to do that. Whatever. And it was awesome. And then we scored and I did it. And I felt really cool. I think everybody was mad. Like the fans were mad. I know the team was mad that it was like the audacity of Tennessee Volunteers to be ranked number 1. It was so perfect. The audacity. Oh, yeah, I hated it. Oh, man. It was perfect. I think they knew pregame, too. I think they knew. I don't know, you could just see it. It's never good to be ranked number 1.
I just love that so much. I really do. Audacity is such a good word. And we remember this. Georgia fans were in such a fever pitch during that game. The team itself, I think, was kind of feeding off all that too. Like they had been fed for a week this belief that Tennessee was somehow better and that, remember the ESPN story, they're going to score 50 points and, all this crazy stuff. And I don't know, maybe Kirby fed the story to ESPN about the defense giving up 50 points. I don't know. Maybe he did. Whatever he did, it worked because that was just one of the most intense days in the history of Sanford Stadium. And, frankly, it's like of all the kind of border rivals that Georgia has, like you're not hearing a peep out of Florida right now. You're not hearing a peep out of Auburn right now. You're not hearing anything out of South Carolina right now. We'll see if Clemson still has a pulse at some point in time this year. Like the one sort of border rival that Georgia has that's still trying to show some signs of life is Tennessee. They're a factor on the recruiting trail right now. They believe they can be kind of a fringe playoff contender here right now. Even though Georgia also kind of blew out Tennessee in Knoxville last season, the fact of the matter is dominating Tennessee the way that Georgia did in 2022 as time passes, that may get even more significant in the future. That may even be an even bigger deal as you kind of move through the future. But it's really fun to think about Stetson Bennett, his memory of that. And I love the fact that he, to this day, is still angered about the audacity of Tennessee being ranked number 1 to come into that game. A great thing there from Stetson Bennett and kind of a fun thing to do here on a Friday. All right, speaking of Tennessee, they're also a major factor for Georgia when it comes to some of these recruiting battles that are being waged and decisions that are about to be made. So I want to spend a few minutes here. We're not going to take too much of his time because he was kind enough to give some of it to us on Wednesday, and plus I've already gotten to him very late here. But I do want to kind of preview a lot of what's about to go down while I'm gone over the course of the next couple of weeks. So with that in mind, let's get ready to bring on Jeff Sentell for all of the latest on UGA recruiting, including some more Georgia versus Tennessee battles here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Well, I tell you what, I appreciate his time, even though I'm late getting to him. I want to be respectful of that time. Jeff Sentell joining us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And so, Jeff, the purpose of this conversation here right now is this is the last time you and I are going to talk for a couple of weeks, and yet you're going to be a very busy guy because Georgia's about to have a lot of decisions. Some, I think, are trending away from UGA, if we're being completely honest. Some are trending towards UGA, which is sort of what we come to expect. And as I mentioned a moment ago, a lot of these, or at least a handful of these, sort of see Tennessee as a little bit of a factor here. So let me begin with tomorrow. Any candle still in the window for Travis Smith, or is that ship sailing towards the Tennessee River there in Knoxville here right now for the 4-star receiver out of Westlake?
Oh, Brandon, I loved how you used ship sailing. What's on your mind, brother? Man,
I guess so, yeah.
You got a boat you got to catch?
I guess that's the case.
I wouldn't call it Owen Popo old school ship sailing, but that candle might burn for a while, Brandon. That people might not come home. I was trying to think about the best Bon Voyage gift I could give you today, and maybe I could say by the time you return, I think Georgia will have at least 4 more commitments. Is that good enough for you, man?
I would
Or
say that.
do you need 5?
No, I would say another 4 would not be too bad of a thing on that. But it does not sound like Travis Smith is going to be one of those.
I just kind of watch, you just watch this stuff for a while, Brandon, and for Georgia to take five receivers in this class doesn't feel like it's going to happen, especially when I truly feel they're going to take 1 or 2 in the portal after that. So like they might, I don't know if Professor James Coley is going to go and pull in 7 receivers. Now he might lose 6, might lose 5 to the NFL and other methods, but I don't know if Georgia's going to bring in that many high school receivers, and that's one thing that's concerning. Brandon, I don't even know if the CJ Wiley candle ship, the flip ship, let's call it that, holds a lot of merit for me right now. I think they will continue to recruit CJ Wiley really hard, but we just got to be fair, Brandon. We've said this before. We're not going to backtrack it. We've thought for a long time, you and I, that this was a perfect storm in the state of Georgia with receivers, with need, with a Heisman Trophy candidate, with all those things you want to see there to attract in-state receivers. They're both Terrence Edwards proteges.
Yep.
I mean, all the breadcrumbs, all the possible magnetism for Georgia at the peak of its power should be able to attract one of these 2 young men. But there's Alabama a little bit. Most of the pundits have it Travis Smith going to Tennessee over the weekend. I'm going to tell you what, he's going to do well at Tennessee. This is a great young man, a great kid, a great family. It's just one of those things for me to see Georgia going to 5. It would have to be one of those fantastical type receivers in the class that they just can't say no to, and they shed another position group number there as well. But Tennessee, Alabama, wherever Travis Smith decides on Saturday, they're going to get a doggone good ball player, maybe just not a dog.
So you say something interesting there, because I think the way I would make peace with myself on this, because Smith's been a guy I've liked for a really long time, and as you mentioned, whether it's Alabama or Tennessee, it seems like the writing's on the wall that it's probably not Georgia. But the way that someone like me would make peace with that is, well, that's okay. I still feel like that Georgia could pivot back to C.J. Wiley, and I'm just being honest with you. And we try not to read too much into body language. We try not to make too many assumptions around here. But in the video that we broadcast, both parents flanked on either side of Wiley. Neither one of them looked happy that day when he chose Florida State. Now, maybe that was just being surprised by the decision. As I said before, I don't want to read too much into body language, but those were the stiffest smiles I've ever seen in my entire life. And it sort of would at least sort of foreshadow the possibility that, when the family sort of huddles again for maybe a second shot at all of this, from my perspective, air quotes, the right decision eventually, gets made there. I mean, given the mood in the room, doesn't that kind of keep Georgia alive for Wiley a little bit like maybe it was a year ago for K.J. Bolden, who also briefly made a Florida State choice?
Yeah, but I think there was so much investment by Kirby Smart and K.J. Bolden. It was a defensive back. It was a 5-star. It was the #1 player in the country at his position. I'm going to share something with you. The Wiley family, they're not demonstrative people, Brandon. They're just not. CJ's not. I've had many a coach, I've had many a person tell me is like, it took me a while to figure out whether CJ Wiley really liked me. That's assistant coaches, that's college recruiters. He's just a very, I guess I would say, reserved person, a reserved family. I mean, you're seeing this video and it's probably like, oh my gosh, this guy looks like he's having the best time of his life. This is a lot of emotion here for CJ. Like everybody told me about those tomahawk chops. Like that's CJ, man. That's just what he is. That's CJ probably dialed up to about 7 or 8.
Okay.
On a scale of 10. And I want to say this, Brandon, and I hope this makes the right amount of sense. I have the feeling now, and it's somewhat substantiated, that if it is a tug of war to get you to come to a place like Georgia now while you're in high school, like Georgia full court press CJ Wiley, they treated him like he was AJ Green Jr. They really wanted him. And for it not to happen, and I just think in this day and age, college programs, college coaches, not just saying Georgia, I get the feeling that if it's hard enough to get you to come to our school now, imagine how hard it's going to be when you're in your second year and you're third team on the depth chart still, or maybe you're only getting special teams run. Does that make any sense? I really get the feeling that a lot of schools are just going to be like, man, if it's this hard, especially to a place like Georgia, where, Brandon, you can go on a million shows right now, and no talking head would ever say that there are three better places in the country to be right now than the University of Georgia. Nobody would say that.
Sure.
So I would just say that's probably a consideration now where it's like, man, if you don't want to be here, we're not going to pull out a Jerry Maguire or some sort of Robert De Niro or Al Pacino, even any given Sunday speech to convince you to come to Georgia or convince you to come to our school. Because it's just going to be so hard to keep you when you get there if you're not bought in at the beginning, or we have to really, really sell you on it.
So a date we've had circled for a long time is July the 20th, and one of the decisions expected to come that date, speaking of Georgia versus Tennessee, a guy that you had a chance to spend some time with a little earlier this week, Christian Gass, the linebacker from Eastside, he is getting ready to make his decision there on that day, and this kind of being a Georgia-Tennessee battle, that's kind of what this is right now, right?
Yeah, he said USC is kind of in there, but it doesn't sound like it, Brandon. It sounds to me like Christian. And again, Christian's a guy, first of all, Eastside High School. That's a great name for Georgia football fans, great school. Eric Stokes Jr. matriculated through the halls of Eastside High School. And Brandon and I was at practice this week, and the coaches on that staff speak about Christian the same way that they remember, they still see Eric when he comes around. Really hardworking family, really young man that everybody loves. His coach told me, he's like, man, I don't even think the kid's ever gotten a tardy. That's how squeaky clean he is. He said, if I had 100 players like Christian Gass on my team or Eric Stokes Jr. on my team, we wouldn't even need to have coaches here. They just run practices themselves. They do their own gassers. They do their own post-practice runs to get better. So I think Christian's an excellent fit for Georgia. He's only been playing linebacker for one full season. And to get in the spirit of things, Brandon, I asked Christian this question this week, and it's going to be in a DawgNation.com story that's going to publish probably right after I get off the show. But you know, you can't come out and ask kids, hey, where are you going to commit? Or who's your current leader this close to it? They like a little subtlety. They like a little theatrics to it. So I just said, let me ask you this. Christian, when the NCAA football game comes out, which team are you going to play with first? Christian, he goes, oh, man, that's a good one. That's a good one. And he goes, I'm going to play with Georgia first.
Okay.
Because he says Georgia is a team. Georgia is a big dog team. He said he played with a lot of schools. He actually mentioned Colorado, which shows Q rating right now of Deion Sanders. He did mention Alabama. He mentioned Tennessee. But he said the team he's going to play with first is Georgia. And he also said he's going to find a teammate that will pick Alabama so he can play one of those Georgia-Alabama games on his favorite next-gen platform. Now, is that a crystal ball?
Is he ready for the excuses that'll be coming digitally if Alabama loses? Obviously, I'm sure the EA Sports College Football video game wants to be as accurate as it possibly can be. And so much the same way you got certain fight songs built into the game, you know, sort of like this litany of excuses coming from Alabama if they lose. Is he prepared to deal with the onslaught of all that?
Brandon, I'm told, I've gotten word, I'm told that there will be a digital representation of a billboard that says our top two receivers are out when Alabama's trailing in the fourth quarter. That's how it's in the game, man. If it's in the game, it's in the game. So I think that's curious when a guy like Christian Gass, he didn't grow up a fan of Georgia, but he is aware of Georgia. It sounds like to me, Brandon, that the relationships with Schumann, and this is what you got to lean on, the relationships with Schumann matter. It sounds like they're a little deeper, a little more embedded there than the ones in Tennessee. And I'll be blunt, Brandon. I'll ask you one of your thinking man's contrarian. I'll answer one of those thoughts right now. Look at the finalists: Georgia, Tennessee, USC.
Yeah.
In terms of, I don't know, for the average normal daily DawgNation viewer, the alarm bells that go off. But for me, that says something when you look at the finalists that says, wow, two of those schools are well publicized for their NIL offerings. One of those schools is maybe not. Now, Georgia hasn't had the high-profile NIL cases, headlines like Tennessee and USC did. So I asked Christian, I said, people want to know, how big of it is NIL going to be a factor in your decision? And he said, not very big factor at all. So if you're looking for a way about how Tennessee or USC wins this recruitment ahead of Georgia, and we're taking Christian at his word that NIL is not a big factor, I'm going to say that makes Georgia a strong contender for his announcement.
But doesn't everybody just say NIL is not a big factor? I mean,
Yeah.
like we're led to believe that somehow Georgia's, if I'm just being completely honest, we're led to believe that somehow Georgia is selling something other than NIL, but we just got an example to Melo Jones driving a Porsche. I mean, like, it sort of feels like those two things don't exactly live in the same universe.
Yeah, I'm sure, Brandon, you'd love for me to send you the audio for your show about this. The guy that says NIL is a very big factor right now.
Yeah.
I need this school to come in with 12% more dollars, according to my spreadsheet, in order for me to change my mind with the cost of living in school A versus school B.
Sure.
He's like, I got state taxes to worry about. Like, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
But Christian is a guy that he looked at me, and the way he answered it, we had video on Before the Hedges this week. It doesn't seem like that was a calculating answer. What he wants is a school to not promise him anything. Georgia's not promising anything. They're not saying when you're going to play. He knows Schumann will make him better, and he knows Schumann will develop him into being a better man. And that did match up with his core criteria of what he's looking for. He did not mention a Porsche or a Lamborghini, or we would have had that breaking news on DawgNation Daily.
How about the rest of July 20th? It's been a busy day on the recruiting calendar, at least expected to be for quite some time. What else can Georgia fans look forward to or be watching closely for on July the 20th?
It's an interesting time, Brandon. It was going to be a chance where Georgia had a chance to get 3 commitments. Christian Garrett actually couldn't wait to be a Dog.
That's right.
It's impressive to see that sometimes this day and age, where he dropped the mic on his commitment timeline and said, yeah, why wait? I don't want to waste anybody's time. And then Christian Gass moves in and becomes another potential 3-dog night for the Dogs that day with 3 commitments. And it's really intriguing how it all works, Brandon, because like if I just said some names and let's act like this is May 15th and we're being honest with each other and we're like Travis Smith, Cortez Smith, Christian Garrett, Bryce Davis, we would have thought that there were a lot of Dogs in that group. We would have thought maybe that would have been all Dogs in that group. It seems like the Bryce Davis decision might be a casualty of simply numbers at Georgia, because sometimes, I mean, this is a PSA to the young people. I know everybody wants to make their day when they want to make their day, and maybe July 20th is somewhere around the family cookout, the family reunion, and everybody's coming in for your ceremony or whatever. But you got to lock these spots down in this day and age. And I feel like with Bryce, I think a guy that would be a very effective player at the University of Georgia. A lot of things that he does very well, sets the edge, rushes the passer, tough, tenacious. That's what Georgia wants. I mean, Georgia has built a championship program on players like Bryce Davis. It's just that they've got a amazing edge committed right now in Isaiah Gibson. They've got Darren Akinabong out of New Jersey that's been committed since April. And now they got other needs in the shopping cart, man. Kirby's got other needs, other types of players he wants to look at to fill out this class. And Clemson, Georgia battle, that might be Clemson winding up with a player that potentially, they didn't outkick all the competition there for Bryce Davis. That's a name to watch. You've got Cortez Smith, a guy that people worried about that in both directions. People thought that the Dontrell Glover recruitment was saying something about Dontrell was the center of the future and not maybe a guy like Cortez. And Cortez has been a guy that, man, I've followed Cortez since he was a freshman starter at Parkview, man. Yeah. He's looked very much like a Georgia player.
I like him a lot. Yeah, I like him a lot. I really do. Because the reasons you said, because of the fact he's been playing since he was a freshman. This is a guy who's a pretty polished player at a very young age.
Yeah, high-level football at Parkview High. But, Brendan, it looks like he has been following the Cedric Von Prawn Granger starter kit, the way he operates, the way he trains, the way he goes about his business and everything else. I mean, Peaches still gets crazy when we bring up Cedric Von Prawn Granger.
I like it.
Listen, very, very pro SVP house, but you've got guys that seem like they were trending away. They seemed like they were going to be Dogs, and now they're going in the opposite direction. And that's kind of what that's kind of what college football recruiting is right now.
Let me do two quick things here, and I'll give you the floor to do anything else you want to before you say goodbye. We saw Georgia had a very talented safety the other day in Jalen Morgan. Are they on the verge of doing that again with Rashad Johnson out of Florida, who I believe is set to announce on Sunday?
Yeah, this is interesting, Brandon, because his nickname is Tom Tom, because he's everywhere like that old school GPS on the field. This is what interesting, Brandon.
That's a very early 2000s reference for the current teenagers. I wouldn't have known that a teenager would have known what a Tom Tom was, because frankly I had to go back in the annals of my mind to remember that there as well. A very early 2000s reference there on that.
Well, for the 2000s crowd, Brandon, I think what you got to consider there is I don't think the kid's named after the Tom Tom GPS. What I think he's named after is another matter altogether. But listen to this. This is what sticks to me about the Rashad Johnson decision. Interesting group of finalists. You see Georgia with not the typical amount of heavyweights there in the group. But the other thing there is, Brandon, he was offered by Georgia just on June the 8th. That was a camp offer. That was a T-Rob looking at his guy type guy offer. And that, to me, stands out a lot, that a guy in this day and age gets a Georgia offer I think it was June 8th, and then he takes his quick official visit basically a week later, and then he decides on July the 14th. Now, we've seen some quick twitch recruiting processes. I think Landon Roldan is one of those, but this one, especially for the DBs, Brandon, we know DBs are different in Athens. They come over under a greater scrutiny and microscope because that was Kirby's position. But Rashad Johnson would be number 20 if he chooses the Georgia Bulldogs on Saturday.
A last thing for you, unless you got something else you want to give to me. Tell me something good about Justice Terry before we say goodbye today.
Whew. Brandon, I think I wrote this a while back. Something good about Justice Terry's, man, I don't think this thing is going the distance. I don't think that marathon's going to happen. It might be one of those Peachtree runners that hit that cardiac hill and they're like, you know what, I'm good. Let me find a watering hole I can dive into for a little bit to kind of space out the trip. I don't think that thing's going to go all the way to December. There may be some sort of recruiting fatigue to it, but I think there's momentum there. I think there's inertia there with Georgia. And again, Brandon, we talk about all these other players. Let's just cut to the heart of the matter. I know you like to say dispense all the pleasantries. What Georgia is seeking to do with its recruiting class right now is to add the number 1 defensive tackle, that's Elijah Griffin, and then the number 2 defensive tackle in Justice Terry, Brandon. That has never happened in Georgia football recruiting, where they would get the number 1 and number 2 DLs. I want you to think about this roster right now, this 2024 burgeoning championship roster right now. You know how many 5-star types there are in the first string or second team on this defensive line? 1, and that's counting on ascendancy from Jordan Big Baby Hall. And that might be the difference, friends, from an all-time great Georgia defense or maybe a squad this fall that's going to have to lean on those receivers and that quarterback and that dynamic offense and that offensive line in a few big games, especially those big games on the road. But if you can flash forward and look at a Georgia defense that has the back end, that has all the 5-star linebackers, thank you, Glenn Schumann, and then puts multiple 5-stars across the front, Brandon, that is something that I think you will raise a glass to on your Royal Caribbean cruise and think fondly of what might be coming down the road for Georgia.
Before we say goodbye, anything that I should have asked you about that I didn't, given the fact this is the last time you and I will talk here for a few days?
2026 is going to get started, Brandon, pretty quick.
I like it.
There's going to be some guys. There's already some guys to me that it sounds like Todd Hartley is really working ahead of time with the class right now for 2026 tight ends. Georgia has a chance to really clean up in state, Brandon. And there's a name eventually that I think everybody's going to celebrate when he becomes a dog in that 2026 class that I think will be one of the true leaders of the class.
Quite a interesting tease there. Jeff, good stuff. We hope you enjoy the next couple of weeks. I know it'll be busy with all of these commitments dropping, but we'll look forward to getting plenty of that from you. And, of course, I'll look forward to speaking to you back here once I'm back in this saddle again in a couple of weeks here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Thank you so much for your time.
Brandon, your audience will not need a tom-tom to find you. I hope you come back with a 5-star tan.
There you go. I love it.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, like Tom-Toms and was it Garmin's, things like that. Like none of that stuff exists anymore, right? That's the thing you had to like plug into your car and kind of had to have it like up on the dash. I mean, you got to be 30-something years old to have had one of those, right? So I think that's probably the case. Maybe there's still, I can't imagine anybody still has that, given the fact that, like, you know, Waze and these apps exist now. Nonetheless, good stuff from Jeff Sentell. And as Jeff alluded to, I am getting ready to do more than just cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I'm getting ready to cruise with Royal Caribbean. I am really excited about that. I saw some new video stuff dropped yesterday on Utopia of the Seas, because you got to understand, Utopia of the Seas has just been constructed. It is only just now sailed into Port Canaveral for the very first time. And next week, or it's getting ready to welcome in passengers for the very first time. And I am going to be among the very first to do it. And I tell you, one of the things when you walk on the ship, one of the first things you're going to see is that brand new pesky parrot. You know, it's a really creative, kind of tropical themed bar. And that's one of the things that Royal Caribbean's always looking to do. Looking to up the antes on like the bar and the restaurant offerings and the things like that. And that's what this Royal Caribbean cruise ship is all about. You get the view bar up there at the top of the ship, you know, kind of like it's a rooftop, except instead of looking over maybe a downtown skyline, you're looking over the ocean and all the tropical stuff. But it's just going to be so much fun. And the added benefit for me is it's a preview for what we'll all get a chance to do with each other in April on our DawgNation cruise for the very first time there as well. There's so much excitement about Utopia of the Seas, and I want you to get a chance to experience it. Our good friend Jessica Slater, a wonderful travel agent, she can help you plan your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation on Utopia of the Seas, which is sort of a first-of-its-kind offering from Royal Caribbean. A brand-new Oasis-class ship. That means one of the biggest, one of the best ships dedicated to those 3- and 4-night sailings out of Port Canaveral, which for folks here in the Atlanta area or the state of Georgia, in all likelihood, the most convenient cruise port for you to get to. Now a brand new ship doing those very convenient 3- and 4-night sailings. You want the long weekend, you want the 4-night. That is what Utopia of the Seas is going to be all about. So Jessica Slater can help you get planned up on this. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also find her online by emailing her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. That's jslater@dreamvacations.com. Okay, so in a moment, I'm going to talk to Kaylee Mansell, and we're going to preview what's going to go down next week during this spot. We're going to do live media days coverage as a replacement for DawgNation Daily. This will be on the podcast feed and the video stuff there too. Also with our radio friends there as well. While I am away from work on Utopia of the Seas, and then doing a big family event the week after that. So we'll have good stuff with Kaylee coming up on that in a moment. Let me give you my own thought on SEC Media Days. And each day that I'm gone, I'm going to try to give you a sort of a short, you know, kind of, I guess, synopsis from me on kind of what I see as the sort of the news of the day. We'll look forward to doing that. But I think when you kind of roll into Dallas next week, you're sort of talking about a handful of categories within the SEC. First of all, you got the 2 new teams. They're obviously kind of in a category by themselves. And I'm assuming, given the locale and given kind of how the SEC network is sort of treated this, that the overwhelming majority of just the sort of run-of-the-mill mainline media coverage is going to be about Texas and Oklahoma and the sort of new teams in the SEC. And frankly, I'm going to be a little bit annoyed by this. Obviously, you can't help but have a good bit of chatter because these are 2 very recognizable programs, and it is a big deal to have them in the SEC. I totally get that. But there is probably a certain balance of questions that once you go over that, probably becomes to me a little bit annoying. And I'm guessing the level of Oklahoma and Texas talk probably gets a little annoying. So go ahead and be on guard for all of that. Another category of team at SEC Media Days next week is going to be the team with the troubled coach. Obviously, no better example of that than Florida, who has the issues winning games in the field, and whatever's still left over from the Jaden Rashada lawsuit for Billy Napier, there's probably some of that. And just this idea that there's no one in a hotter seat right now than Billy Napier. He'll deal with that. Sam Pittman will probably deal with that some too. Pittman's probably gracious enough, though, to kind of sidestep some of the issues related to all of that. But there'll be some of that there for those sort of embattled coaches who kind of know they need to win or else. There'll also be kind of a group of coaches who kind of deal with the idea of, hey, it's time to, even if you're relatively new in your tenure, it's time to kind of raise the fortunes of the program a little bit. This is second-year coach Hugh Freeze at Auburn. This is first-year coach Mike Elko at Texas A&M. There are a handful of coaches who kind of, are going to have that responsibility of the program prior to me wasn't performing at an adequate level. Can I now get it back more towards what it's supposed to be? If you ask me, though, what's the most interesting thing of the non-Georgia conversation next week there in Dallas? To me, putting Georgia aside for a moment, the most interesting conversation I think is going to kind of be built around that team and that group of teams that are sort of thought to be in the second tier below Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, Missouri. Those are the 5 highest-rated SEC teams, I believe, in the preseason polls. But when you get down to that next group, I mentioned Texas A&M. They're in this group. Tennessee is in this group. LSU is in this group. I would say that Oklahoma is also in that group. Of those 4 teams who all have quarterbacks who could take a big step forward and rosters that are at least talented enough that big-time play from a quarterback has the potential of changing the fortunes, for those teams in an expanded playoff year. Of those 4 teams, who generates the most talk and who kind of comes out of SEC Media Days sort of feeling the most, potential to kind of surprise a bit? I would say those are the 4 most interesting teams in the SEC next week in terms of, we know it's going to be said about Alabama. It's how do you replace Nick Saban? We know it's going to be said about Texas of, are you ready for the SEC? We know what it's going to be said about Georgia. It's, being the best and whatever. Some of those conversations are sort of etched in stone. But the 4 teams I just mentioned, LSU, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, given their preseason projections, given the potential at quarterback, given the overall strength of the roster, in some cases given the schedule they're playing, could they perhaps come out of SEC Media Days with a little bit more steam than they go into it with? I think that could be interesting to see. And we'll see how it plays out. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, speaking of Dallas, and speaking of SEC Media Days, the person will be anchoring our content here around DawgNation, including during the 10 a.m. hour next week while I am away and on board Utopia of the Seas, is our Kaylee Mansell. And as we get ready to do our long finish here, presented by the Finish Long Drink, I want to bring Kaylee into the program. First of all, Kaylee, it's always great to have you as a part of DawgNation Daily. I certainly appreciate that, especially when it's part of our long finish here, presented by the Finish Long Drink. Let me ask you, both personally, but also the event itself, how excited are you about being in Dallas next week for SEC Media Days?
Before we talk all things Dallas, I do want to mention that this looks really orange on camera, maybe Tennessee orange, but it is not orange. I knew people would come at me in the comments for that. So it's coral, but it looks orange on camera. I'm excited to be a part of SEC Media Days. I went once, but only for one day. So I'm excited to hear all the coaches speak. But I think the one thing that's been on my mind is that I'm excited to consume as much Texas barbecue as my body will allow me to have.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good thing. I would certainly be in favor of all of that. I think you got to do that. I've never been to the state of Texas.
Me either.
Yeah, so, kind of Texas culture is a little bit different. Do you kind of agree that because the event is in Dallas, that maybe the Texas-Oklahoma part of the conversation, questions to other league teams about the news, that because of where the event is, the Texas-Oklahoma chatter will be even higher than it probably would have been if it was in Nashville or Atlanta or its customary home there in Hoover?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, previously the event's been in Atlanta, Birmingham, Nashville. I don't consider Dallas, Texas to be a part of the Southeast. So I think by putting it in Dallas, you're naturally going to draw more attention to those teams like Texas and Oklahoma and maybe even Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I do think it's very out of place that it's in Dallas, but I'm personally excited just because I've never been to Texas. This may be my only opportunity to go out there besides when Georgia plays Texas in the fall. So I'm excited, but it does feel a little bit out of place, and I do think that the specific geographic location will call for more questions to be asked about Texas and Oklahoma.
So can I give you something that I'd like for you to try to notice while you're out there? Would that be okay?
Sure.
So I want to give you an example. When Georgia has been in Miami for the Orange Bowl, especially I noticed this when they were playing in Michigan in what was a college football playoff game. The city itself was totally unaware of the game being played. Miami's a very big city. It's a very busy city. A lot of times it sort of gets tabbed as an international city. And so therefore there's a lot going on there besides the college football playoff game. And, these folks who are oftentimes not the most traditional sports fans, the best that I could tell traveling all over South Florida that particular week, they didn't know there was a game being played. Even the day of the game, you had to be at the stadium to sort of feel a vibe for a college football playoff. I felt the same way in L.A. when Georgia was out there to play TCU in 2022. This was at the end of the 2022 season. This was a national championship game, but L.A. was completely oblivious to its presence. Once again, this is one of the biggest metro areas in America. A lot going on there, not the most hardcore college football fans. They just seemed blissfully ignorant of the fact that such a big game to us was taking place out there in a way that if it's in Atlanta, that's not the case. Atlanta is very, very college football centric. So the point I'm getting to, Kaylee, is here's what I'd love for you to try to notice. When you are in Dallas, I want you to notice, does the city know that SEC Media Days is taking place? Is there signage around town? Does it feel like that the city is just in recognition of what's happening here? Because sometimes these big cities just are not that into it. And Dallas is now sort of an SEC market, I reckon. Do they know the event is there? Does the event feel big in that city? Because I think that could be somewhat telling for the SEC's future.
I think that you bring up an interesting point here. Now, it is important to note that the baseball all-star game is also going on in Dallas at the time of SEC Media Days, so maybe that will overshadow it a little bit. My guess is that it's going to kind of fall somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's necessarily going to be like a Miami or LA where nobody cares what's going on because it's the first time the event is being hosted in Dallas. I do think that they'll bring some sort of audience or shed some sort of light on the event, but I don't think it's going to be like a Birmingham where the city's going to shut down because of this event. But I will definitely get back to you with my notes, full citations, MLA format.
I love that. Hey, give us an idea of what your coverage on video is going to be like next week.
I mean, it's not. It's hard to live up to what you do on DawgNation Daily, but I'm going to do my absolute best to carry on your legacy. It won't just be me, Coach.
Hold on, don't say carry on my legacy. It makes it sound like I died. I'm going on a cruise. I'm not going to the great beyond.
Hey, look, you have been saying on the show that you're going to be gone for a couple of weeks, which makes it sound like you're going to be gone for like the next month, and that's not true. So I do want to let everybody in the Facebook comments who was worried, no, it's not going to be that long of a time. But I do want to make you proud. However, our coverage, we've been working so hard on this behind the scenes to make sure that we deliver the expectation of DawgNation as you guys would expect for DawgNation Daily. Me and Cody Chaffins will be bringing the coverage live from Dallas, as well as Mike Griffith, Connor Riley, and I don't want to give away too much, but we have put in some requests to have special guests on the show. So I hope you guys are excited to see what we've put together and some of the more notable stars in the media world that we intend to bring on.
That's fantastic. And I'm not a notable media star, but I do plan on being at least a part of each show, at least in some fashion, each and every day there as well. So there'll still be a taste of me. And then apparently other notable media stars there as well. Hey, before I let you go, and I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago there as well, you've also got a brand new show debuting around DawgNation as well. We're calling it DawgNation Tell All. You've had a chance to do some pretty in-depth interviews with most of the DawgNation staff. I guess one person did not show up for his assigned meeting. We'll leave that. We'll leave that for the off-the-air conversation. But of the interviews that you've done so far with a good number of our DawgNation folks, myself included, what did you kind of, I guess, learn about all of this, and what do you feel like the audience is going to find interesting? Maybe seeing a little bit of another side of some of us, maybe a little bit of a deeper conversation with some of us than you sometimes get. What was that like for you to kind of be on the other side of that?
So the last time that we talked, we hadn't even filmed the first one yet. We were about to, and now sitting here, we filmed 3 of these so far. Still have 1 more left to go. But I think even in all the planning that we did for this, I could have never imagined what it was actually going to be like until I got the chance to sit down with a lot of you guys, because not only is it a tell-all with all the behind-the-scenes moments and y'all's journeys to get here, but also some of the Georgia football moments that y'all have gotten to witness on firsthand accounts. And I think that Jay Black described it perfectly yesterday. You were the first one to be a part of Tell All. Jeff was the first one to make me tear up, and Connor was the first one to cuss on air.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of just goes to show the different personalities, and I really just wanted to be able to bring a different side of you guys, and I think that we've accomplished that, and so I'm excited for the first one to air.
So the first one's going to air Tuesday, July 23rd.
Yes.
That's going to be a lot of fun. Now, of all the ones you did, which one was your favorite, and why was that the one you did with me?
I loved everyone's. Everyone did a great job. I thought everyone brought something different to the table. But yours was obviously up there, top 3 for sure.
There you go, Kaylee. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I may be a little bit biased because I do talk to this person a little bit more off the set, but I really enjoyed getting to sit down with Connor, because even though I talk to Connor on a daily basis, that's the person I feel like I know the least about. Okay. And I think that he made a good point that sometimes he can be a little bit standoffish when watching him on camera, but that is for specific reasons. And his was very vulnerable, and I was not expecting that from him. So I think that people will be the most surprised by Connor's.
Shocking. That's fantastic. Hey, Kaylee, great stuff. Look forward to seeing a lot of you on video in my normal spot the next couple of weeks. And obviously, just proud of the work you keep on doing. So great job there, and thanks for being here as part of our Long Finish presented by the Finish Long Drink.
Thanks, Brandon. Have some long drinks for me on Royal Caribbean Cruise.
I promise you I'll do that. Good stuff from Kaylee Mansell, and obviously we know Kaylee loves the Finish Long Drink just as much as we do. In fact, Kaylee and I have this in common. We both love the Long Drink Traditional, the one you see right there over my shoulder if you're watching on video, the blue can. It's the grapefruit flavor. It's the gin kick. It is the perfect combination for me. They just sort of taste like summer and taste like being in the Caribbean or wherever else you might be, because if you're at the beach, let me tell you something, the Finish Long Drink's a great choice. And our buddy Cody Chafin's had the peach-flavored version of the Finish Long Drink at his recent beach vacation. And whichever choice you go with, when the pop the top on the can, when you got all that going on, when you get the waves crashing in the background, obviously it is so much fun. And as you roll into a weekend, make the weekend as good as it can be, wishing you could have been a little longer maybe. But nonetheless, make it a great weekend with the Finish Long Drink. You can find out where to pick some up today. The peach-flavored version, the traditional version, the cranberry, the Long Drink Strong, which is 8.5% alcohol by volume, Long Drink Zero, no carbs, no sugar, all of that online, thelongdrink.com. You can find out where to pick some up here today. Make sure you check that out. And as we wrap up, let me just take a quick moment to say this. In lieu of a golden shoe today, I just wanted to pass along my gratitude for the fact that I do get to show up and do the show each and every day. And the fact that looking back on what's already been a really fun run, almost 9 full years, I guess we'll celebrate our 9th anniversary coming up here in August, almost 9 full years of doing this show. And so much excitement about what is to come. And I loved both of our conversations we had today because it gave us a great sense of that. What we're looking forward to with UGA recruiting, I think Jeff Sentell dropped some really good nuggets on that. What we're looking to next week with SEC Media Days, and then Kaylee had some really good stuff on that. And then to go back to the very beginning of the show with Cole Kubelik on exactly what Georgia can be in this 2024 season. What a fun time to be a Dog fan, and we have a sort of a recent past that's so enjoyable, but a future that has the promise of being even better. Great time to be talking about all of that. We'll look forward to doing plenty of that with you in the months to come. But let me tell you who's got none of that. It's those lousy, stinking Gators. Florida, it's sheer misery for them. And you know what? That's part of the fun for us, too, to be honest with you. 1,343 days. That's how long it's been since Florida has beaten Georgia. While I'm gone, the good thing about that number is it keeps right on climbing. Have a great weekend. Good stuff for you coming next week. And then I'll see you a couple of weeks after that. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Have a great weekend, everybody. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. You can tell the season's getting closer because this was by far and away the longest show we have done in quite some time. So there you go. But we'll get your comments here, and we'll get ready to roll into a weekend. I told our First and 15 audience a little earlier, and by the way, I think I mentioned this. There will be no First and 15 next week. I believe the week after that there as well. So not doing that here right now. But the point is, I told our first and 15 audience that the laptop today that I always have on my desk is nothing more than a prop because the screen's completely black. I've had some tech issues today, to be honest with you. So I'm keeping the laptop up to kind of maintain continuity, but I am going off the phone today. And we'll get a few of these comments here, then we'll sort of see what's on everybody's mind. Then we'll get ready to roll into the weekend. And I hope you're getting ready for some big weekend plans, whatever they might be. Jay Shipe's wondering if we'll start on YouTube. Yes, we are, Jay, right here on YouTube for sure. Let's see what else. Enrique Murillo says, where are we going on the cruise? So we're going to be on Utopia of the Seas. We're going to Perfect Day Coco Cay. That's the big thing. You know, it's the private island for Royal Caribbean. And for me, every cruise I take with Royal Caribbean, I'm always looking to be on Perfect Day Coco Cay. In fact, was it last year, there was some talk for our DawgNation cruise, but maybe we should do a different itinerary. And I was like, no, man, we got to be on Perfect Day Coco Cay because that's my favorite thing in the world, for sure. Let's see what else. Jeremy Harbin says the Texans may have one of the easiest schedules in the SEC. They really only play us and Missouri. They do play Texas A&M, Oklahoma, but they're not top tier either. Yeah, I mean, I would say that A&M and Oklahoma are both losable games for Texas. But I do agree with your overall sentiment that of a lot of these teams and the schedules we're talking about, you know, it certainly seems like Texas is getting a break compared to what others are playing. Now, some are going to take that to say, well, that's the SEC doing them a favor for whatever reason. I don't know that I buy that, but it is obvious that they're not playing as tough a schedule on paper, certainly as Georgia is. Paul Moon and some others, I guess, talking about soccer. So we just had the conclusion is the Copa America. Is that what that is? I almost the Copa concludes on Sunday. So there you go. And America was eliminated in embarrassing fashion, right? Like, okay, yeah, the coach has been fired. So there you go. I almost got into soccer about a decade ago. This would have been around the time of like the 2014 World Cup. Was it 14? Whatever. Around that time, I almost got into soccer. I am so thankful that I didn't. Oh my gosh, so thankful that I didn't. But I almost got into it. And I do think it's kind of a neat sport, but my dance card when it comes to sports is pretty full. So whatever happened to the Copa, or like you've had like, you know, is it the Euro that's been going on too? Which the Euro also concludes on Sunday too, which I believe I know what this is. That's the club teams from the various countries coming together to play a big tournament against each other. Okay, so I'm now being told that's not the case. So, okay, so there you go. International. Oh, is that right? Well, there you go. England versus Spain in the final. Well, good luck to everybody involved there on that. Let's see what else. There's some weird stuff at YouTube today. Normally, lately, YouTube's been more on topic than some of the other platforms are, but today it's pretty weird. Let's see what else. Yeah, there's some weird stuff in YouTube today. I'm trying to find some. Lance D told Kaylee to ignore Facebook. I think this is related to the fact that Kaylee wore a color that could be thought to be orange. I've also had my issues with color over the years on the screen because, you know, people say that I'm not wearing red or something like that just because, for whatever reason, red shows up a little bit weird on camera sometimes. Let's see what else. Yeah, Mike Tampa Dog says the current European event is the national team. So there you go. Jake Shipe's wondering if Kaylee's going to be staying in my condo in College Station while SEC Media Days is going on, which is very funny. And kind of a long-time inside joke here for a lot of our folks. Roger Allen Martin says, I'm a Vol hater first and foremost. Yeah, listen, you know, there's certainly plenty of dislike for the Vols out there among Dog Nation. No doubt about that. Johnny Surf Dog says, so I read this and I believe it's true. He says it'd be the first SEC Media Days without Papa Saban. But I also saw, I believe ESPN is sending Saban to SEC Media Days, which to me is really, really weird. I probably should talk about this in the regular show. If I'm Kalen DeBoer, I'm not happy about this. And obviously you got to pretend to be happy and things like that. But, man, you're trying to build your own legacy at Alabama. And it's hard enough as it is. The fact that Saban in some form or fashion remains employed by Alabama, I find that to be a little weird. The fact that he's coming to SEC Media Days, even as an employee for ESPN, I kind of find that to be a little bit weird. You sort of get why ESPN would want Saban there. That part I don't see as weird. But if you're Kalen DeBoer, you're like, man, yeah, how do I get rid of this old guy? Which is probably not the only place that question is being asked right now. But if you're Kalen DeBoer, you got to be thinking about that, right? It's like, how do I get my chance to sort of do my thing here? I got this guy looking over my shoulder all the time. Just if I'm DeBoer, I'm not happy about that. How about this? You got Colby Straughter checking in. Colby, we're glad to see you with a new handle today. Glad to see that. Enrique Murillo says Saban's going to be getting all the questions for Alabama. Yeah, I mean, here's the other thing, too, and a lot of you know this. Now, Dallas may be a little bit different. But if you've ever been to one of these SEC Media Days before, like Saban walking into the room has always been such an event. And I'm telling you right now, I mean, I'm not a Saban, fan. I'm not an Alabama fan. But, I mean, I don't mind telling you, like, especially when the event was in Hoover, it was something to see Saban kind of come into that room and sort of the rock star response that these, Alabama simps give him when he sort of walks in the room. I mean, it's amazing to see. And now he's going to come do that again? Like, if it's a bunch of, I don't even know how many Bama fans will be in Dallas. But if it's a bunch of Bama fans and you, think about this. Like, what if, Kalen DeBoer and Nick Saban walk in at the same time? If you're an Alabama fan, who are you going to try to run over and try to get the autograph from or the selfie with or whatever else? I mean, Saban's presence overshadows Kalen DeBoer. I mean, Saban's presence overshadows almost anyone's. But he certainly overshadows Kalen DeBoer. And, you're doing him no favors by being there, even if it's a part of your, current professional employment. But, I mean, Saban's not working for the SEC network. He's working for ESPN. Eddie's still here. Somebody asked about Eddie. Eddie's still here. Sometimes he gets moved off to the side. But he's still here. All right, let me go to the other comment sections for a moment. This is going to be a little bit of an adventure. All right, at DawgNation.com for a moment. We'll see what they're doing over there. We'll pull these up here. The one thing about using your phone as opposed to the other the laptop is you can't toggle quite as easily as you sometimes do. You can't do that quite as easily over here on this. But we'll knock out a few of these here right now. Senior Dog 54 says some of the elite international soccer guys could have no doubt be very good football players, receivers, defensive backs. Maybe that's the case. However, I do believe the transition is easier the other way. For instance, I know enough about soccer to be dangerous, but if you think about one of these big body guys and sort of using the header on the the corner kick, stuff like that, you can't tell me first of all, a really good basketball player, of course, would be able to do that. And I think in some cases a football player there too. In other words, if football or basketball players played soccer, I believe they would dominate. I'm not so sure, and probably this is just my ignorance, but I'm not quite so sure how many soccer players would make the transition to other sports, other than obviously being the kicker. B-Max said he had a couple of questions to scroll back a little. Okay, I'll do that. Shane Holiday says you need to hit the distillery in Cooperstown. Yeah, I did see where they have one. Now, I don't know how much distillery I'm going to be doing with my baseball responsibilities, but I did hear it was kind of nice. See, this is the thing. I'm one of the coaches on the team, and some of you know, I'm very weird about the fact that I don't talk a ton about my personal life on the show because A, I don't think you care, and B, I sort of like to keep my personal life personal. But some of you do know what we are doing the week after the cruise. We are going to Cooperstown for the big baseball tournament up there. Like I said before, I just don't do – I'm a pretty private person for the most part. But I did mention at one point in time that we were doing this. But I'm one of the coaches. So, when you're if you're a parent going to Cooperstown, your kids are staying in the barracks. So that's party central, I believe, for a lot of parents. But for me, I'm going to be, I'm going to be on call the entire time. I do believe it's a pretty good experience for a lot of the parents who are not doing that. But I'll be coaching and things like that. Let's see what else. Shane Holiday also saw Dylan Bell's performance last year against Tennessee the other day. Yeah, going back and reliving that's a lot of fun. BMAC says, which current receiver is going to have the most receptions this year? So let me tell you what I think is interesting about that, BMAC. The other day, when we never played this clip on the show, we just sort of ran out of time. But one of the things that was interesting was when Carson Beck was sort of asked about the guys that are, I forget if the question was replacing Brock Bowers or just the guys that he's throwing to, whatever it was. One of the first guys that he mentioned by name was Dominic Lovett. Lovett also had a really good G-Day there as well. And, I played the clip of Cole Kublik to begin the show today. When Cole was talking about Lovett during his Georgia preview, he was kind of mentioning him as a slot receiver, things like that. And obviously that's what Lovett has been, and he's been a really good one. I get the impression that Dominic Lovett isn't just a slot receiver on this Georgia team. I believe he's a receiver. They're going to use him in a lot of different ways, and that the actual way in which Georgia uses Lovett may turn out to be a good bit different this season than what he was kind of primarily known for when he was putting up big numbers at Missouri. So the answer to that question may end up being Lovett. West GA Dog fan mentioning Nassau. So this is not an ad, I promise. This is just sort of friend talking to friend. One of the things I'm really excited about, because, people kind of bring up Nassau because Nassau is a very, very popular destination for cruises to go to. It's one of the easiest sort of places to get. And a lot of people sort of feel like they've been to Nassau a few times. If you cruise regularly, you've probably been to Nassau pretty frequently. Here's one of the things I'm really excited about is that, and this is not an ad, and you can fast forward through this part if you want to, but I'm just going to say just real quick. So Royal Caribbean is actually building a private beach club in Nassau, really, really close to the main cruise port, that's going to be a little bit like a smaller version of Perfect Day Coco Cay. And by smaller, I mean Perfect Day Coco Cay takes over the entire island. It's like a whole island devoted to this. But this is going to be kind of like a beach club, sort of a private destination, not quite an island, but like a private destination. It's not quite built yet, but it's going to be, I think, finished in early 2025. I think that's going to be a really big deal for Nassau. I really do. And for me personally, I know that I'll be very excited about that. They're also doing one of these in one of the ports in Mexico there as well. Like I said before, y'all know I like Royal Caribbean, so I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. But one of the things I do find really interesting right now, some of the ways they're sort of taking the kind of the Perfect Day experience and kind of expanding that into other places. Private destination in Mexico, I believe. This new beach club opening up in Nassau, which is actually in partnership with the Bahamian government. I think this is going to be a really cool thing. And so if you feel like you've done Nassau before and sort of seen everything that Nassau has in store for you, check out this new beach club that Royal Caribbean's opening up there. Obviously, it'll only be for those on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, of course. But check that out and see if that's not kind of a new thing for you. Let's see what else. Let us see what else. Randy all says we will get Rashad Johnson and Cortez Smith while BA's on vacation. We'll miss out on Travis Smith and Bryce Davis due to limited offers. Yeah, Bryce Davis may be the limited offer thing. I don't know that Travis Smith is due to a limited offer. That may be just due to being outbid or whatever else. But I would say your assessment is kind of what I'm kind of thinking about there on that. West GA Dog fan. Yeah, check this out. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be finished, but I do believe it's at least going to be finished by the time we take our DawgNation cruise in April of next year. So sometimes these sort of construction things are a little non-specific, but I do believe that's going to be a really nice kind of change of pace for Nassau because a lot of people do feel like they've been to Nassau a pretty good bit. I do completely get that. All right, let me go to Facebook. over here on Facebook just for a moment. And then we'll get ready to wrap it up here. Boy, Facebook loads so slow. There we go. Okay, on Facebook here just for a moment. Jacob O'Neill says, will you be calling Friday night football games this year? Yes, I will. I am so excited about the return of high school football. It's going to be an amazing season in Georgia. One of the things for me that lets me know the seasons, we all have like our sort of like work calendar that we just kind of sort of make sense of our life based on how the work calendar flows. One of my big things is the fact that we're getting very, very close to the Corky Kell Luncheon, the Dave Hunter Corky Kell Classic. We always have a luncheon to kick that off. And then those games will be taking place. We're really excited about that. We already have some idea of some of the games we're going to be doing in season. I don't believe I'm supposed to be saying any of that. But we have, I think, a really good schedule. And it's just going to be a good year in Georgia. So you got to understand something. Like, my employer could have restricted me from doing this, and they didn't. They gave me the freedom to go out and do these games, which I very much appreciate. And so it's one of the great privileges that I have. And obviously I love Georgia football on Saturdays, but I really, really enjoy being a part of these high school broadcasts. I work with Kaylee's dad, Rusty Mansell, on those, and just a really, really great experience, and just something I'm very much looking forward to once again here this year. Al Chandler, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. William Camacho, going to be taking a little bit of vacation time too. William, I hope you enjoy that. Let's see what else. Miriam Corbin, sounds like you've been dealing with some health-related stuff in your family. I certainly send prayers out to you there for that. Let's see what else. Randy Hall shouting at Randy Payne. Oh, by the way, Randy Hall pointing out that Buford's brand new stadium could be ready for the playoffs. That place is going to be a palace. That's really something. That's going to be a palace. All right, we're going to get ready to wrap it up for now. Thank you all for the kind words. Appreciate that. Y'all know that I'm a little bit weird about being away from work. I don't like to be away from work very much. I enjoy doing the show, as I mentioned a little earlier. And frankly, I like the daily habit that we all have with each other. But we do think we've got some great stuff planned while I'm gone. And we also kind of knew, at least in terms of the what I'm doing the following week, we knew this would be the only time this would ever happen, sort of a one-time thing. So really excited about that for our family, and really looking forward to being back with you. And as I said, to kick things off today, when I get back, that'll be a signal to let you know season's basically here. And also, you'll still hear from me a little bit. I mean, I keep acting like I'm gone. Physically, I will be. But I'm going to have the ability to kind of communicate a little bit while I'm there as well, and have at least a small portion of each show, kind of dedicated to a couple of thoughts there. So that will be fun. Y'all enjoy the weekend in some form or fashion. We'll see you on Monday. SEC Media Days kicks off. I'm getting ready for Utopia of the Seas. Have a great weekend, everybody. Oh, by the way, R.S. Andrews, make sure you check him out online, rsandrews.com, because, listen, I couldn't go on cruises like this if not for our friends at R.S. Andrews. rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Now, it is so hot, and I'm talking about like oppressively hot. And so your air conditioning is probably working as hard as it can to kind of keep you as cool as it possibly can. So let R.S. Andrews handle all that for you. Find them online at rsandrews.com. They can get your air conditioning unit. Somebody's told you that old unit, you may need a new one eventually. You probably do, but R.S. Andrews may be able to tell you how to get some new life out of that old unit. So find them online, rsandrews.com, for more on that. They bring the R.S. Andrews cool down to us. Okay, have a great weekend. See you soon. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.